It's 4 a.m. in Lake Charles. While the rest of Bradley Street sleeps, a tactical breach is underway. This wasn't a random robbery. It wasn't a crime of passion sparked in the heat of an argument. This was a calculated, military-style home invasion. There were 5 people inside apartment B when that door gave way. By the time the sun rose over Louisiana, only 3 were left alive. And those 3 survivors, they were all under the age of 10. They didn't just hear the screams. They knew the faces of the men who caused them.
Released the identity of the 2 people found dead in an apartment yesterday morning. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Agnes Derwent. The investigation occurred in the 700 block of Bradley Street. Officers found the bodies of 39-year-old Courtney Grogan of Lake Charles and 40-year-old Cyrille Mitchell Jr. No further details were released.
Welcome to The Dark Minds, where we strip away the headlines to analyze the forensic truth behind the world's most chilling cases. Before we dive into the evidence, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive. And do us a favor, drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you are watching from. Your support keeps this investigation going. Let's get to it. The door at 709 Bradley didn't just open, it was obliterated. Inside, Courtney Grogan, Cyrille Mitchell Jr. were caught in the most vulnerable place imaginable, their own bed. Forensic evidence suggests the attackers moved with terrifying efficiency. There was no struggle in the living room, no signs of a prolonged fight. This was an ambush. But the true horror isn't just the 2 lives lost, it's the audience that was forced to watch. As the Lake Charles Police Department secured the perimeter, they made a discovery that would change the trajectory of the entire investigation. The 3 children found physically unharmed in the apartment weren't just random witnesses. 2 of them were the biological children of the very men the police were about to hunt down. Sheltren Tucker, 38, father to one of the children. Desmond Brown, 39, father to another. How do 2 men, who share nothing but a history with the same woman, set aside their differences to form a lethal partnership? To understand the how, we have to look at the why and the jealous alliance that was forged in the dark long before that door was kicked in. When the first responders stepped across the threshold of apartment B, they weren't met with the chaotic mess of a typical robbery. The air wasn't thick with the scent of a struggle. It was thick with a heavy, clinical stillness. Forensic teams would later note the eerie precision of the scene. Courtney Grogan and Cyrille Mitchell Jr. were found exactly where they had sought sanctuary in the master bedroom. The placement of the bodies suggested that the end came with a terrifying suddenness, a violent interruption of sleep that left no room for defense. But as the flashlights cut through the darkness, the beams didn't just land on the victims, they landed on the survivors. 3 children, the oldest not yet 10, were huddled in the immediate periphery of the violence. In the world of forensic psychology, we call this the impact zone. They weren't tucked away in a distant wing of a mansion. They were mere feet away, separated by thin walls and a shattered sense of reality. The silence of those children is what haunted the officers most. There were no hysterics, only the wide-eyed, catatonic stare of those who have seen the world break in half. Now, lean into the irony, the jagged, bitter pill of this case. As investigators began the grim task of identifying the next of kin, the family tree started to bleed. They discovered that this wasn't just a home invasion by strangers. This was an invasion of the domestic circle. 2 of the 3 children left trembling in that apartment carried the DNA of the very men who had just breached the door. Think about the psychological architecture of that moment. Sheltren Tucker and Desmond Brown weren't just suspects. They were dad. To the children, these were the men who were supposed to be the gatekeepers of their safety, the ones tasked with keeping the monsters at bay. Instead, the children watched as the monsters took on a familiar face. From a Times Dark Minds Times perspective, the forensic damage here isn't just measured in shell casings or blood spatter. It's measured in the total collapse of a child's internal compass. When a child witnesses their father execute their mother, the brain undergoes a catastrophic rewiring. The source of life and the source of death become the same person. This isn't just trauma. It's a biological betrayal. The irony is as sharp as a razor. Tucker and Brown didn't just eliminate a former partner or a romantic rival. By committing this act in front of their own flesh and blood, they effectively executed the childhoods of their own sons and daughters. They left the apartment that night, thinking they had settled a score, perhaps believing they had reclaimed some twisted sense of control or honor. But in the eyes of the law, and in the eyes of the children who survived, they had only succeeded in ensuring that their legacy would be written in the ink of a police report. They didn't just leave behind a crime scene. They left behind a living, breathing forensic record of a betrayal that no amount of therapy can ever fully erase. The witnesses were silent. Yes, but their very existence in that room spoke louder than any confession ever could. To understand the mechanics of this murder, we have to look past the broken door and into the shadows of the days preceding the attack. This wasn't a spontaneous eruption of anger. It was a slow-motion collision. Investigators began to uncover a pattern of surveillance that would make anyone's skin crawl. Sheltren Tucker and Desmond Brown, two men who, by all accounts of human nature, should have been rivals, or, at the very least, strangers to one another, had found a common enemy. Reports emerged that they weren't just brooding in their respective corners of Louisiana and Texas. No, they were reportedly watching. They were a presence in the periphery of Courtney's new life, a haunting duo observing her and Cyrille Mitchell Jr. from the darkness of parked cars and the silence of digital screens. Imagine the psychological profile of that alliance. It's what forensic analysts call a shared delusion of grievance. Two men, linked only by the fact that they had been replaced, decided to merge their shadows. They traded information. They coordinated their movements. In the days leading up to August 19th, they weren't just ex-partners. They were hunters. They were calculating the rhythm of Courtney's home, the timing of the lights going out, and the precise moment when the man she had chosen over them would be most vulnerable. This wasn't just jealousy. It was a joint venture in annihilation. But as the investigation delved deeper into the why, a ghost from the past emerged to provide a chilling context. It came from Sheltren Tucker's own sister, Alethea, who broke the silence with a revelation that sent a shiver through the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office. She revealed a shadow history, a family legacy written in blood. Years prior, when Sheltren and Alethea were just children, they had lived through their own Bradley Street. Their own mother had been murdered, taken from them by the hands of a jealous ex-partner. This is where the forensic analysis of the mind takes a dark, circular turn. For decades, Sheltren had carried the weight of being a child witness to a domestic execution. He knew the sound of the struggle. He knew the coldness of the aftermath. He knew exactly what it felt like to have your world incinerated by a man who claimed to love the person he was killing. The logic here isn't just flawed, it's haunting. Usually, survivors of such trauma spend their lives building walls to keep that violence at bay. But Sheltren? He didn't just break the wall. He became the architect of his own nightmare. By entering that apartment with Desmond Brown, he wasn't just committing a crime. He was reenacting his own origin story. He was forcing his own children to inherit the same hollow stare he had worn decades ago. It's a forensic cycle of violence that defies every instinct of paternal protection. He saw his own history repeating in the eyes of his children as they huddled in the dark, and he chose to pull the trigger anyway. The baby daddy pact wasn't just an agreement to kill. It was an agreement to pass down a curse. It was two men deciding that their bruised egos were worth more than the psychological survival of their own bloodline. They looked at their pasts and their futures, and they chose to burn both to the ground in a single, coordinated act of vengeance. Courtney and Cyrille were the targets, but the children were the collateral damage in a war that started long before that night in Lake Charles. For 10 days after the smoke cleared on Bradley Street, there was a deceptive silence. But behind the scenes, a massive invisible net was being woven by the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Marshals. They weren't just looking for two men, they were orchestrating a synchronized strike. In the world of high-stakes fugitive recovery, timing isn't just a detail, it is the entire mission. If one suspect feels the heat, a single text message, a 5-second phone call, or a frantic DM can send the other into the wind, turning a closing case into a cold trail. The morning of the 29th of August, 2024, was the moment the net was pulled tight. The sun hadn't even begun to break over the Gulf Coast when the tactical teams moved into position, split across state lines. At exactly 6 a.m., the quiet industrial landscape of Groves, Texas, just outside Port Arthur, was shattered. Sheltren Terrell Tucker was at work, likely believing he had successfully blended back into the mundane rhythm of the world. He was on the clock, a cog in the machine of a local industrial plant, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the smell of grease. He probably thought the 60 miles and the state border between him and the crime scene acted as a shield. He was wrong. The U.S. Marshals didn't just walk in. They swarmed. There was no escape through the back exits, no time to reach for a weapon, and no chance to warn his partner in crime. Tucker was taken down in the very place he felt most anonymous. His transition from laborer to lead murder suspect happening in a matter of heartbeats. But the clock was still ticking.
Meanwhile, a wanted man has been caught in Port Arthur. 38-year-old Sheltren Tucker is the prime suspect in a double murder in Lake Charles, according to police. Our 12 News partners at KPLC report that Tucker is accused of killing his ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend earlier this month in Lake Charles. On August 19th, 39-year-old Courtney Grogan and 40-year-old Cyrille Mitchell Jr. were found dead at a duplex on Bradley Street in Lake Charles.
The authorities knew that as soon as word of Tucker's arrest hit the grapevine, the window of opportunity in Louisiana would slam shut. Precisely 15 minutes later, at 6:15 a.m., the second hammer fell. 60 miles to the east, in the small town of Welsh, Louisiana, the Daddies Parish Sheriff's Office and Lake Charles investigators converged on Desmond Brown. While Tucker was being processed in a Texas precinct, Brown was being surrounded in the quiet dawn of his own neighborhood. Think about the logistical mastery required for that 15-minute gap. 60 miles of highway separate Groves and Welsh. If you look at a map of the Interstate 10 corridor, you see the distance, but the police saw a communication line they had to sever. The coordination was designed with one goal: total containment. By the time the news of Tucker's capture could even begin to circulate, Brown was already in handcuffs. This was the double manhunt, a tactical masterpiece that left no room for the suspects to pivot. It was a 5-minute window that turned a conspiracy into a cage. They had conspired in secret to enter Courtney's home, but the law had conspired in even greater secrecy to take them out of the world. As the two men were transported back toward Lake Charles, the silence that had followed the Bradley Street breach was finally broken not by more violence, but by the heavy closing of jailhouse doors.
On August 28, 2024, the Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office assisted in a multi-agency operation in reference to a double homicide and was investigated by the Lake Charles City Police Department. During this investigation, LCPD detectives obtained arrest warrants for 2 suspects believed to be responsible. The Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office was contacted by the United States Marshal's Office, along with LCPD SWAT, regarding the execution of the search warrant in Jeff Davis Parish at the residence of Desmond Brown, located on Kayla Street off of Highway 101, just south of Highway in Calcasieu, Louisiana. The Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office coordinated with the LCPD SWAT team to execute the search warrant at the home. However, in the early hours of August 29th, 2024, while awaiting the execution of the search warrant, Desmond was located at a local convenience store and taken into custody without incident.
The hunt was over, but the forensic dissection of their pact was only just beginning. With the physical hunt concluded, the arena shifted from the streets of the Gulf Coast to the high-ceilinged courtrooms of Calcasieu Parish. This is where the baby daddy pact met the unyielding machinery of Louisiana law. The state didn't just walk into the arraignment with a standard murder charge. They came with a legal strategy designed to ensure that neither man would ever see the sun as a free citizen again. The numbers alone tell a story of perceived danger. Sheltren Terrell Tucker stood before the bench, facing a bond of $2.1 million. It is a figure meant to be insurmountable, a financial wall reflecting the gravity of a first-degree murder charge coupled with home invasion. But look at Desmond Brown. His bond was set at $1.5 million. In many jurisdictions, a secondary player might see a fraction of that, but in Lake Charles, the message was clear. There is no minor role in an execution. To understand the legal battlefield, you have to understand the specific, serrated edge of Louisiana's principal statute. In this state, the law doesn't care who pulled the trigger and who held the flashlight. If you provide the transportation, if you help breach the door, or if you stand guard while the life is taken, the law views your hands as being wrapped around the weapon alongside the killer. As a principal to first-degree murder, Desmond Brown isn't just an accomplice in the eyes of the prosecutor. He is a co-author of the death certificate. The state's argument is surgical. Without the coordination, without the shared surveillance, and without the mutual intent, Courtney and Cyrille would still be alive. In the eyes of the blind goddess of justice, Brown's presence at that door was the catalyst that made the carnage possible. And then there is the home invasion element. This is the linchpin of the entire first-degree charge. In Louisiana, if a homicide occurs during the commission of a felony, like a forced entry into an inhabited dwelling, it automatically elevates the crime. It moves the case from a tragedy of passion into the realm of capital litigation. It opens the door for the ultimate penalty. The prosecution is meticulously building a case that this wasn't just a murder, but a tactical violation of the one place a human being is promised peace: their home. As we sit here, in 2026, the wheels of justice are turning with a heavy, grinding slow motion. Both Tucker and Brown remain behind the reinforced glass of the Calcasieu Parish jail. They are no longer the hunters. They are the processed, moving through a system of pre-trial motions, discovery phases, and the slow gathering of forensic witnesses. The duplex on Bradley Street has likely been repainted, the splintered door replaced. But the legal echo of that 4 a.m. breach continues to rock Lake Charles. The community is waiting for the finality of a trial that promises to be as grueling as the crime itself. There are no plea deals on the table that can erase the image of those 3 children in that room. The legal battlefield is now a war of attrition, where every text message exchanged between the 2 fathers and every minute of their coordinated surveillance is being weighed on the scales. They thought they were settling a score in the dark, but now, every second of their lives is being dissected under the unforgiving fluorescent lights of the American justice system. The final gavel has yet to fall, but the cage has already been built, and the door is locked from the outside. As the legal documents are filed, and the mugshots fade into the archives of Lake Charles history, we are left with the hollow space where 2 lives used to be. In true crime, we often get lost in the how and the who, but the who that matters most aren't the men in the orange jumpsuits. The who is Courtney, and the who is Cyrille. Cyrille Mitchell Jr. was 40 years old, a man described by those who actually knew his heart as funny, loving, and remarkably down to earth. He wasn't a character in a thriller. He was a man who enjoyed the simple rhythm of a quiet life. He was a man who had stepped into a complicated situation with an open heart, building a bridge toward a future with Courtney. He didn't have a pact. He didn't have a strategy. He just had a life, one that was abruptly and violently terminated because he happened to be the one standing in the light when 2 men from one of that, the shadows, decided to strike. Cyrille was the innocent witness to a resentment he didn't create, caught in the lethal crosshairs of a past he was trying to help Courtney outgrow. And then there is Courtney, a mother, a woman who was clearly trying to turn the page, to find a new version of home that didn't involve the toxicity of her previous chapters. She was the anchor for 3 children, who now have to navigate a world where both their protectors and their provider are gone. The true human cost isn't just found in the obituary. It's found in the birthdays that will go uncelebrated, the graduations where those seats will be empty, and the quiet moments in that apartment on Bradley Street that will forever be stained by the memory of a splintering door. This case forces us to look at the dark architecture of human obsession. It reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a stranger in an alley, it's the wounded ego of someone who once claimed to love you. It raises a haunting question about the nature of responsibility and the reach of the law. Was this a failure of a system that couldn't see the warning signs of two men watching from the darkness? Or was this a premeditated evil so specific and so coordinated that no amount of intervention could have stopped it? We often look for a why that makes sense, but in the Courtney Grogan case, the why is as ugly as the crime itself. I want to hear your thoughts on the legal weight of this tragedy. In a joint effort like this, where one man facilitates the entry and another pulls the trigger, does the distinction between killer and principal even matter anymore? If you believe that the man who helped break that door deserves the exact same finality as the man who held the weapon, I want you to drop a comment below. Type, "Justice for Courtney," to show your support for the victims and the survivors left in the wake of this pact. Thank you for joining us for this investigation. If you value these forensic deep dives into the cases the mainstream headlines often miss, where we prioritize the victims' stories over the killer's notoriety, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our PACES community here at The Dark Minds. We'll see you in the next investigation. Stay safe and keep your eyes on the shadows.